If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I'm back with another album review for you guys. This time, I'm taking a look at the latest studio offering from one of the biggest upcomers in modern thrash metal today, and that is Enforced with War Remains. So this is the band's third album altogether, third full-length, and their second one on Century Media Records. I remember I actually reviewed the last one, Kill Grid, that came out around the same time 2 years ago, so it seems like April every 2 years, it seems like we get a new Enforced album, because Kill Grid came out at this point 2 years ago, and now here we are, April 2023, with War Remains. So yeah, basically for those uninitiated, Enforced, modern thrash metal titans, also like crossover thrash, because there's a lot of hardcore going on here, and it's mostly not so much crossover thrash, it's just more thrash metal with like hardcore breakdowns. Not so much like crossover thrash in like the riffing style, because there is a certain riffing style to crossover thrash that I associate crossover thrash with. This, more thrash riffs, but with hardcore breaks, if that makes sense. But yeah, I checked out Kill Grid when it came out, and I really liked it. This album almost feels like they took where they were going with Kill Grid, but just for some reason decided to just amp up the aggression. After all, it's Enforced, they're all about aggression. But yeah, it's like immediately we kick things off with aggressive menace. Right away, sinister brutality, just all throughout the album. It's like this whole album just goes for a more darker, more sinister, evil sound, I would say, than Kill Grid does. And even on a lot of these tracks, like Aggressive Menace, Hanged by My Hand, Ultraviolence, Starved, and Empire, all these songs have some moments that definitely make me think of Slayer. Like, a lot of the riffage on those tracks made me think of classic Slayer, and not that it's a bad thing, I think that's an amazing thing considering I love classic Slayer, and I love hearing modern thrash bands kind of take influence from the old school, but make it into something that does still feel fresh to modern listeners today. And that's pretty much one of the big things that this album does very well, is taking old ideas from classic bands, but still make it sound like they were originally written by a modern band. And I love when old school heavy metal worshippers kind of do that, but make it into something of their own, or bands that take old school metal influence or old school metal impulses and put it within something of their own, like Darkthrone, for example. I love when bands are able to do that, but not sound derivative from the past. And I think Enforced definitely does a very good job at not sounding like a cover band, but actually helping to take old school ideas, bring them back to modern times, but make it feel like that this is something brand fucking new. And like all the influences you get on this album from Slayer, there's a couple of tracks that give me Metallica vibes, like in the title track, War Remains. It almost feels like Kill 'Em All sped up a notch, which was really fucking sweet to hear. But most especially, I would say the song Nation of Fear. Call me nuts, but it feels like a darker version of Seek and Destroy almost. And that was this is one of my favorite tracks of the album for that reason. It just felt like, what would happen if Metallica did a second part to Seek and Destroy, but make it a little bit darker and a little more sinister sounding? As I just hit the mic, and I'm sorry for that. But yeah, and also what's really cool about this album is, of course, the breakdowns. Like, all these breakdowns kind of range from all sorts of different places, like some cool hardcore chugs to some groove breakdowns, even occasional doomy breaks. Like, there's parts on this album that they get flat out doom metal, like in Mercy Killing Fields, Starve, and Empire. Either there's like a breakdown that feels doomy, or they start off on a more doom metal note, I would say Mercy Killing Fields and Empire were the two tracks that kind of start off a little more on the doom side before it gets into full-on speed and thrash and brutality. Also with Mercy Killing Fields, like a lot of the riffs on this track, I don't know why, it just made me think of the song Soldier Head by Jason Newsted. Like, it was just like, man, this just sounds really cool. Where have I heard something similar to this? Oh yeah, Soldier Head, and that's a really good song by Jason Newsted. So it was almost like part 2 of that, but just amp up the aggression and the speed factor a little bit more. Now, there were some unique moments that happened on some of these tracks, like in Avarice. Towards the end of the song, there are these like little fast, like, evil tremolo spurts that you get that made me think of Altars of Madness era Morbid Angel. It's brief, a couple of measures where you get this, like this really evil sounding high tremolo, and made me think of what something that Triassic 2 would do in Morbid Angel back in the early days. Hanged by My Hand, I love how that starts off kind of like Testament, but then when it gets into like speedy chugs, it's almost like the guitarists are trying to give Scott Ian a run for his money when it comes down to doing speedy chugs. The Quickening, which was the second track of the album, kind of like, first half of the song has more of that hardcore vibe, and the second half gets a little more thrashy, and this kind of made me think of Power Trip. Like, I would compare also a lot of this album to Power Trip, like, sonically and even vocally. Like, the vocals sound straight up like Riley Gale, and even in the production, like the production, I believe Ricky Olsen, I believe that's who's the producer, but the mix and mastering is done by Arthur Risk, who's known for doing stuff with Power Trip, but has also been kind of expanding his horizons. Like last year he did Temple of Void and Creator, for example. So yeah, Arthur Risk is really becoming one of the new modern go-to producers or mixers for albums, which is really cool because he does a great job at capturing an old school vibe but doing it in modern times. Now, the guitar work on this whole album, like the riffs, are just massive, punchy, and even in the leads, like the leads kind of go everywhere from squealy dive bombs giving off that Slayer vibe, but also you get some like cool little melodies here and there. Like Starve starts off with like more of a groovy break, then it gets into a doom break with a dark melodic guitar lead. Mercy Killing Fields even starts off with a cool guitar melody that just felt evil, which was fucking sweet. Let's see, what else did I write? Now, especially with the song Empire, going back to the Slayer vibes, this track almost feels like an all-encompassing Slayer song. Like, there's this awesome, badass triplet chug that made me think of the song Postmortem. And even the breakdown at the end of the song felt like Hell Awaits. It was almost like, you know what? Let's take some of these Slayer parts, do it in our own way, and just create something that we wish Slayer could have done, which was really, really cool. But the drum work, like especially in Starve, these amazing turnovers and fills that you get on this album, and like just the drum work itself is like just flying and wild. Now, when it came down to the mix, like the bass, again, audible, and it is a little bit up in the mix compared to some other thrash albums that I've heard this year. Maybe not to the level of like the latest Overkill album, but you do get a nice gruff tone on the bass on this album, which is really refreshing. Now, as far as like if I can find any complaints, I will say some of the songs do kind of follow a similar formula, and that's like start off with this like cool beginning, build up, and then into either like a groove, hardcore groove, or straight into thrash. And while some people might get put off by that just a little bit, I think they do it very well, and it never gets boring. It doesn't get boring the way they build songs up through dynamic and through tempo shifts, like starting off on a slower note and then getting into blazing speed. Like, I can't even find, like, any, like, speed metal or hardcore D beats on here. Like, anytime it gets fast, it gets into more the traditional thrash beat or even a little bit faster at times. But yeah, overall, I'm going to go out on a limb right now, and I'm going to say that this is perhaps the best enforced album. Like, I think these guys just get better and better. And, well, I think we've got another 10 out of 10, ladies and gentlemen. Like, this album is just hostile, aggressive, vicious, brutal. It's like, the best way to summarize this album is like the thrash metal equivalent to being in a brutal race car crash. You're just there, ready for the impact, and just going for either a wild ride or a vicious, sudden stop when it comes to hitting the wall or something like that. But, yeah, this is a hell of an album. Definitely a contender for Album of the Year. Not just Thrash Album of the Year, but holy shit. Enforced just keep getting better. But, of course, that's just my opinion. What did you guys think of War Remains by Enforced? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.